Why is it that the moment you snap out of a daydream, you feel guilt and shame? Maybe it's because you spent the afternoon daydreaming. Maybe you realize you've just wasted a whole day. And the moment you do that, you feel this wave of shame and guilt. And then you start thinking about all of the weeks, all of the months, even maybe the years that you've spent stuck in your head. If this keeps happening to you, then there's actually a name for this. It's called maladaptive daydreaming. I had that for 10 years. But I was able to recover. So stick with me till the end of this video because I'm going to show you what this hidden cycle is of maladaptive daydreaming and how to finally break free of it. So the first part of this loop, of this cycle that keeps you stuck in maladaptive daydreaming is it's what happens immediately after you snap out of the daydream. So when that wave of shame and guilt appears, what you do with that shame and guilt changes everything. Because what people most likely do, I know I used to do this, and I see some of my coaching clients doing this too, they try to escape the shame and the guilt. So the shame and the guilt comes up, and understandably, it's very, very uncomfortable. But that's the mistake people make and they don't realize it. Because if you keep escaping the shame, that actually feeds into more daydreaming. Why is that? Because this is the beginning of the cycle. You daydream, and then you wake up out of it. You feel guilt and then you feel shame. Then you try to escape and suppress it. But with our emotions, they don't just vanish. Even if you try to escape them or suppress them, they will come back at some point. So then this is what happens with the loop. You daydream, you come out of it. You feel the guilt and the shame. You then try to escape and suppress it. But then eventually it comes back and it's overwhelming because it's so uncomfortable to experience. What do you do then? You go back into a daydream. So you end up in that loop of going around and around, and you might not realize it. It doesn't mean it happens all in one go either. It can be at a later time. And then it gets worse over time because each time you go around that loop, your self-worth takes a hit bit by bit each time, which just fuels this cycle even more. And then ultimately, what does that do? It makes you more likely to go into a daydream because now you have this build-up of these overwhelmingly uncomfortable emotions. You end up having more of an urge to escape. But then here's the mistake that people make with this. Maladaptive daydreaming isn't a weakness. This is where a lot of the shame comes from. It comes from a big misunderstanding of what maladaptive daydreaming is. It's not a weakness, it's not a character flaw, and it's not laziness. Maladaptive daydreaming is a coping mechanism and an adaptation to things like chronic stress, unresolved trauma, and unmet emotional needs. And this happened because at some point in your life, things became overwhelming. You might have had chronic stress that built up and became too much. Maybe there's some trauma from the past. Maybe you've had, for a long, long time, maybe even in childhood, unmet needs, like for example, emotional needs. Your body and your mind can only cope with so much. So what happens? Things like daydreaming can be a way to escape. But that's not all. Because there are other things people do that are similar. You get people, for example, who can't stop drinking. Maybe they binge eat. Maybe they're addicted on their phone. Maybe they're addicted to all kinds of things, right? This is still a type of compulsion and addiction. Ultimately, all of these things are the same type of thing. They're a coping mechanism and an adaptation to something deeper going on. So then the thing people misunderstand is that maladaptive daydreaming isn't your enemy. It's actually trying to protect you. It's a way for your mind to try and help you. So when we compare maladaptive daydreaming to those other kind of addictions, you'll see that it's not that different. And I'm saying this because I think when you see maladaptive daydreaming in that way, it helps to reduce the shame and the guilt. So you see that there's actually a good reason why it's there, and you shouldn't really blame yourself all the time for it. Because what I find when talking to people who have maladaptive daydreaming and are looking to recover is that they carry so much shame and guilt because they feel, understandably, that they've wasted months and months or even years of their life. But that is the very thing that can keep it going because it fuels the need to escape from your emotion. So I'm going to say to you, as I've said to other people, you are being way too hard on yourself for something that was ultimately not your fault. And if you want to learn more about how I recovered from maladaptive daydreaming, I'm going to put a link at the end to a guide that I created that shows you the 6 main steps that I took to recover. But then there's another layer to this. And if you miss this part, you're not actually getting to the root of why this is happening in the first place. Because as I mentioned before, each time you go around that cycle, your self-worth decreases. And that's a key thing to understand. So what can happen is your mind will look for ways to increase your self-worth, but it uses things that don't really do it in the long run. It's only for a few moments at best. So for example, you might look for approval from other people. You might look for validation from things that have got nothing to do with you. Or you might look to fantasies like daydreaming in your mind because it can make you feel better about yourself. So it temporarily increases your self-worth. How does it do that? I'm sure you know, if you have maladaptive daydreaming, how people can create characters and scenarios. And what you'll notice is probably in quite a lot of them, it puts you in a position of being more loved, more empowered, because there's that underlying emotional need that hasn't been met in real life. So then how do you escape from this cycle? What actually helps? The most important thing to do first is have compassion for yourself. That means you don't shame yourself anymore. You don't beat yourself up. You don't speak horribly to yourself in your mind. You let go of the guilt. And I understand that's easier said than done. I'm not saying you do it just like that. It takes practice. It takes time. And one of the best things you can do is to imagine that you have a close friend, or let's say like a life partner, right? Who comes to you and tells you, I'm experiencing all these daydreams, I can't escape it, and they start feeling guilty about it. What would you tell them? Would you start making them feel shame for it? No, you probably wouldn't, right? So then why do you do that to yourself? What would you do instead? That's the question to ask. Because probably what you would do is you would empathize with them, you would have compassion with them, you would try to understand what happened, why are you experiencing this? And then what would you do? You would help them. You would try and get them help, or you would try to help them directly. So that's what you start doing to yourself. You start talking to yourself like you are your best friend, and if they were experiencing maladaptive daydreaming. So that means you can guide them and say, okay, let's go and get you to talk to a therapist, or for example, a coach like myself, somebody who's gone through this, even if it's just to understand what is the next step to take. Because I can see it, for many clients, it's overwhelming to think they've had it for like many, many years. And they're thinking, how can I overcome something that I've had for so many years? It doesn't matter how long you've had it, you can still recover. The biggest change that people make is when they realize, I can change and I don't have to beat myself up about it. You don't have to feel guilt and you don't have to feel shame to overcome maladaptive daydreaming. In fact, letting it go is one of the biggest things to do. Having compassion for yourself is the first step to take. Remember, shame and guilt is what keeps this cycle going because it lowers your self-worth, which just increases the urge to escape the uncomfortable feeling by going into daydreams. So the next time this happens and you snap out of a daydream and you realize, oh my God, I'm feeling guilt, feeling shame, don't run away from it. Allow the shame and the guilt to be there and feel it. Yes, it can be overwhelming, but when you train yourself to sit with those emotions, your mind learns, oh wait, it's safe to feel this emotion. I don't have to escape from it. So when you do it bit by bit, gradually, you don't have to jump into it straight away. You train yourself to sit with those emotions a little bit longer each time. You are teaching yourself and your mind that it's safe. Then tell yourself, there's a reason why I have maladaptive daydreaming. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. There is a way out, and I'm now going to go and take steps to start getting better. So there are 2 things you can do right now to start recovering from maladaptive daydreaming. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, I'm going to put a link to a video guide on how I recovered from maladaptive daydreaming. So you'll see that at the end of this video shortly. You can also get a 1-page free PDF guide in the description of this video and in the pinned comment that summarizes the main steps of that video. So that way, once you've watched the video, you also have a guide to remind you of what to do. The second thing you can do is to book a one-on-one call with me where I will help you to recover from maladaptive daydreaming based on your specific situation. So check the link in the pinned comment and the description below for a link to my website. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry the guilt and the shame anymore. And you don't have to lose time to daydreaming. You can get your life back. And let me know in the comments, what is the main thing you've learned from this video that you're going to start putting into action today? And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.